Good evening and welcome to the kickoff of the Women in Leadership series. I'm Sherry Plants-Masters, the Academic Dean of the Anderson College of Business and Computing at Regis University, where we integrate business and computing education to build a better world. The Anderson College pursues innovation through our capabilities, through the expertise of our faculty across disciplines of business and computing, through collaboration across and between those disciplines, and through the intentional focus on inclusion. Our graduates learn to approach problems from a systems perspective, assessing and evaluating solutions to assure that they meet the needs of a system. They learn to use data and analytics for informed decision-making. We prepare students and graduates for careers through experiences that help them develop their skills, capabilities, behaviors, and attitudes, as well as a commitment to community. And graduates develop an awareness of and a commitment to the common good and to building a sustainable future through the foundation of a Jesuit education. I'm excited for tonight's session. With our partner, Corporate Cowgirl Up, we are dedicated to shining the light on excellence in leadership and to celebrate the careers and lives of these fine role models. Whether you are a woman or a man, there will be lessons to learn tonight. Authentically You is a panel discussion among three phenomenal women who each served as a tech-savvy Chief Information Officer for the state of Colorado. It is my pleasure to introduce Wendy Bowling, speaker, thought leader, and corporate consultant on gender intelligence and inclusive leadership, co-host of the award-winning Big Girl Money podcast, CEO of Corporate Cowgirl Up, and author of Cowgirl Up, A Woman's Guide to Navigating the Corporate Frontier, and Book of Badass. She has more than 30 years as an executive in the corporate saddle at some of the top telecom Fortune 100 companies and healthcare startups.
Thank you so much, Sherry. What a fabulous introduction to what we're going to hear tonight. I am over the top honored to moderate this fantastic set of powerhouse panelists. And I'd like to kick it off by introducing each of them. We first have Suma Nalapati, and she is currently the Chief Digital Officer and Senior VP of Dish Networks, Dish IT, with over 25 years of experience. And of those of you who are wondering what the cool title of Chief Digital Officer is, she's responsible for enterprise digital transformation and delivery for Dish Networks. Most recently, she served as Colorado's Secretary of Technology, and in 2018, CTA named Suma CIO of the Year. The National Diversity Council named her as one of the top 50 most powerful women in technology. And not to be outdone, Colorado also named her to their list of one of the 25 most powerful women. Thank you, Suma.
Thank you for having me.
Teresa Sazurek is an interesting mix of a serial technology entrepreneur and a senior global C-level executive. After her start as a Bell Labs engineer, she co-founded and led 3 technology ventures. Most recently, she served on the Governor Polis's cabinet as the state of Colorado CIO and executive director of the governor's office of IT. Teresa authored the Amazon bestseller, Pursuit of Passionate Purpose, sharing a proven step-by-step formula for success, which everybody could use, right? Not only a lifetime Girl Scout and leader, Teresa also works to attract more girls and women to STEM careers.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, thank you, Teresa. And last but not least, Kristen Russell, uber dynamic executive with over 20 years of experience in leading and catalyzing large global operations, services, and IT organizations. She's currently the president of global services at Aero Electronics, a Fortune 500 company, and Kristen served as Colorado CIO in 2012. Just like these other 2 powerhouse women, Kristen's recognition in the industry includes the Bob Newman Lifetime Achievement Award, Top Innovator for Embedded Computing Design, Dreamers, and Drivers, and Denver Business Journal CIO of the Year, as well as the top 25 most powerful women by the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce. How lucky we are to also have Kristen. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Wendy. It's a pleasure.
Wonderful. So how we're going to work this is as you go through, questions are going to come to you, and we want you to place those in the Q&A, not the chat, which we're all used to doing, but this will work better to help us tonight to make things go more smoothly. And we're going to warm up the panelists and the attendees by posting some questions that we came up with, because remember, it's all about us, the people that plan this. So I'd love to start out with, and as we talked, feel like not everybody has to answer every question, because the more we can get to, the better, right? So I'd love to start off with the first question being, how would you define being authentic in the workplace? And what power does it bring the organization and you personally to work with those that are authentic? Kristen, could you take a shot at this first?
Sure. So, you know what, I had a thought about this because, I think authenticity it's like love, right? We know it when we spot it, but it's a little bit difficult to, codify and figure out what exactly it is. But for me, I think true authenticity is about honesty, it's about humility, and it's about vulnerability, which I think is an interesting kind of paradoxical way to think about it. But when you're honest, when you're authentic or humble, and when you have humility and vulnerability, I think you show up in your most authentic self. And again, I think we all know when we see that and spot that, and it feels really good. So I think that the most authentic people tend to be the most successful in business. So I think that it's a really powerful tool that people can use if they can harness that humility and that vulnerability and that honesty.
Well said.
Wendy, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry, Suma or Teresa, would you like to take a shot at this?
Well, let me jump in next. This is something I'm really passionate about. And that's because, being authentic to me is being real, being true. And it starts with knowing and nurturing yourself. Think of the sages, the into antiquity who said, know thyself. Well, this is where you find your passion. Think of the song, you can't get what you want till you know what you want. Well, you can't get what you want until you know what you want. You can't know what you want until you know who you are. And so you have to start with asking the question, who are you? And I did a whole bunch of research on this for my book, but the most important thing is, of course, what I found in life. You take and ask yourself, what do you value? What's meaningful to you? And connect it with your gifts, your talents, your experience. And when you find the intersection of those two, you will find what you're passionate about. And so being authentic in the workplace is living true to your values and using your gifts. And when you do so, your power just explodes. You really find you are passionately pursuing your purpose. You find great meaning and satisfaction. You produce extraordinary results, and your organizations love it because they get the benefit of it too. And so it feels good. Anyone here interested in feeling good? Yeah. Okay, so be authentic.
Well, thank you. I'd love to have Suma talk about, because you show up so authentically. I mean, this is why we picked all of you women. And to have you have done the same role and to have been able to be yourself exactly is just phenomenal. But what about the downside of it? What if you do show up in this really real way and it kind of hits that underbelly of, and it's hard. It's the arrow goes deep when you show up and it doesn't go well. So what advice would you give folks that run into that?
Be even more of yourself when you go through that. Don't give up, right? And again, it's such an honor to be on this panel with women that I truly deeply admire and respect. And Kristen actually brought me to the state of Colorado, and I take that with me forever. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So I have that admiration for you, Kristen, for the rest of my life.
Oh, thank you so much.
To hand over my, like my child to you with my transition. So there's a deep connection between all three of us. And Regis University, thank you so much for doing this, because it helps people understand what it means to be in the public sector, be in places where there's a lot of to reflect our careers and journeys, right? And for me, again, being authentic, I do it with a lot of thoughtful deliberation. I think Teresa mentioned, right, building on a foundation of self-awareness is super critical, because there are days when I think I'm like the person, but there are flaws and blind spots that I'm not aware of. So having a 360-degree view of myself helps with being my authentic self in a relevant organization and cultural context way, because my authenticity may offend someone else if I don't bring the context to it, right? So I try to do it with a lot of deliberation, a lot of awareness. It's hard work. It's not easy because you just want to be yourself, but yourself shouldn't offend someone unintentionally or intentionally. So that's why I think it's important for us. And again, asking myself the question, why should anyone be led by me? Why? Right? So I put that context for myself all the time, and I'm authentic, but in a very considerate, thoughtful manner. And when we do that, again, if there's still after that, if there's fallback, it's okay. We'll deal with it.
I love it. Thank you.
You know, there are times when you may find yourself in an environment that is not a match for you. You know, yet, so if you are really living true to yourself, I think you have to really try to balance it with the environment and allow others to be authentic. But I mean, I had this happen in one company that I had actually co-founded, and I had to see, okay, could I live with the situation, which was not like 100% in line with my values, or could I change it? And if I couldn't live with it or change it, you have to move on. And so in that regard, I ended up having to leave my baby, my first company that I had started, Radish Communication Systems. So it's an important question.
So it's how long you stay, right? It's that I tell people the longer you stay in a bad situation, the more normal it feels. So I totally get it. And this is the kind of thing, guys, the elephant in the room is most of us are the only woman in the room most of the time. So you do get a lot of pressure to act like the men, right? And to even I got told once, don't wear such bright suits, you know, and from someone, Kristen, I remember us talking where you got asked, do you have sparkly something on your eyes? I'll never forget that. And you leaning into it. Yes, I do. Now let's talk about the budget. I mean, it was fabulous. So this running into this happens a lot. In fact, if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, and I think this is something that from a gender perspective, sometimes women suffer from, but I would tell myself not to be so afraid of failing. And, you know, I think, I know, I mean, I know, Suma, this is something you and I've talked about, you know, when you come from families of, you know, very kind of high achieving families, sometimes what happens is you know, at least for me, I felt like I'm not going to try that if I feel like I'm not going to win at it, right? Or I can't win at it. So therefore I won't try. And I think, you know, what I would tell my younger self is two things. One, don't be afraid of failing. If you're going to fail, it's actually better to fail when you're younger than when you're older, because the stakes are a lot lower, right? But the other thing is, and I think we know this now, but you actually learn so much more from failure than you do from success, right? And, you know, when things go well, you know, people go, oh, great job. You did such a great job at that. And you're kind of like, yeah, I don't know if it was this, or I don't know really what I did that made that successful. But when we fail, we can really point to, like, these were the things that I would have done differently. And so I think I pulled myself out of things because I was worried about failing. And I think that that's probably what I would tell my younger self, is to not worry so much about that, because there's really gems and nuggets of learning and experience that will help propel you forward. You know, if you take those risks.
Fabulous.
It's a great question. Wow. I grew up with a really math and logical, rational part of my brain, you know, was just, you know, strong. It was like what I call the head. And what I learned over time was the importance of balancing it with the heart, the deep, caring, feeling, you know, relationships. And I remember a statement from a wise woman I knew, Martha Arnett, and she said, the most important thing in life is relationship. Make them as harmonious as possible. And so I think I would have told my younger self, it's not all, you know, getting A's in all those technical classes, you know, take some of the other softer feeling classes and balance the head and the heart.
Such nuggets. Thank you. But Suma, I have to hear this from you too. Sorry. Or
Yeah.
we do. It's not all about me. Sorry, guys. Please, Suma.
I would say the most important thing for my younger self is, and women of color especially, culturally, we are asked to be submissive, we're asked to be softer, you're asked to be feminine. You don't just speak up, right? And that was my biggest problem with my career early on. I was so sure of what I was doing, but I didn't know how to speak up. And I didn't know how to self advocate. I was the quiet person in the room, and I would hear all these men and other people just talking BS out of their mouth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but I wouldn't say it, right? I was so quiet about it. So I would say, like, now just say, I mean, now I can't stop speaking. That's my problem.
That's not a problem. Well, I have to ask, because what if you don't know if you're authentic, if you're maybe we think we're being authentic? This actually was one of the questions that came in, and I was just thought it was such a great, what I mean, as we get older, I think we're more clear of ourselves, but early on, how do you even suggest people get to know themselves to the point that they really learn how to be authentic? Does that make sense?
I think life tells you it. It's the journey of life from which you learn. You know, I talked about finding your authentic self by looking at your values and your gifts. And so I do this little exercise where I ask people to go on a journey back through their life and to ask, you know, the major things that come forward that you remember, that you learned from, what value was behind it. And, you can learn from yourself. And I remember climbing the corporate ladder at the largest Fortune 10 company in the world, just charging. And I realized when this, one of my co-managers was out to get me. And I realized there was no underlying trust. He did not trust me. And so one of the values, looking back at that, I realized I needed to trust myself. I needed to build trust with the others around me. And so anyway, let your life tell you.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think, when you're not authentic, it feels really bad. Like you just don't feel good. It's kind of like you're wearing clothing that doesn't fit, right? And when you feel like that, or you feel like you have an interaction that just doesn't feel good, I think that you have to examine that and say, you know, I wasn't showing up as myself. Let me think about that and what didn't work there. I think that's what I think it doesn't feel good when you're not authentic.
Hello, COVID.
Exactly, my Coda dog. This is their playtime with me, so they're like, "What are you doing? We're
Yeah,
playing."
exactly. No, that is a great way, because if that feels, it's like your gut, right? So I love that. So if you're on and you're feeling like you have none of that, none of the I'm wearing a mask, I'm trying to be somebody else, right? I love it. And Suma.
No, I think people around you, they connect to the authenticity when it's there, and when it's not there, they connect in very different ways. And so again, as Teresa mentioned, it's all about relationships, right? And your authenticity reflects in that relationship, and it's easy. I mean, when you talk to a person who's real, and you just want to be around them, it just feels good, right? It doesn't matter if there's an agenda or if there's a business proposition or anything. You just want to have a conversation. You just want to have a relationship. So be that authentic self, and come up and bring your whole total self, right? Absolutely do that.
So Zink that actually asked the question, she loved the answers. So thank you so much, y'all. All right, we have one question from the audience around this topic. Sue asks, how have each of you maintained your personal self while also being highly successful in a highly competitive world? Especially the tech world is pretty intense. So how have you maintained that sense of self? Or is it something you haven't struggled with?
Well, I think my perspective on this, and we kind of talked about this earlier. When I think about this, sometimes you do, and Suma, you kind of mentioned this too. Sometimes you have to be very understanding and empathetic and meet people where they can be. And, in very male dominated worlds, and in tech, or at any type of different culture, even if you travel internationally, if the dress code is a certain way, that may not be how you would dress, but you're respectful of the culture and the environment in which you are there. And so I think, it's like if you, and travel is kind of the best thing in different cultures, because if you travel a lot, you realize that, it may not be natural for you. It may not be where you would say, this is my authentic self, to try to speak Italian. That's not what I did. But I realized for me to be successful with my colleagues that are Italian in Italy, that trying to speak their language actually is really important to them, or dressing in a certain way. And so I think that you can still be authentic, but be understanding and thoughtful about the environment of which you are at, where you're at, and figure out how to find that success in that. And I think we've all done that, right? We've all had to adapt and be agile to the environment that we've been in, so that we can be successful and yet still remain to our authentic self. And I think, Teresa, you mentioned, core values and gifts and things that are really deep inside. Those are kind of non-negotiables, but there's lots of ways that we show up in different environments so that we can achieve the success that we have achieved.
And I'll just add to that. Sorry,
Go ahead, someone.
The thing is, again, being my authentic self, I come from a different country, a different culture, right? And so I try to acclimate to the country that I'm in, and follow the rules of the thing. But my hair is curly and thick. I use industrial strength straighteners, and this is what I get, right? And I can't change that about me. So I embrace it. I'm like, this is what you get. And Kristen and I have various conversations on matte lipsticks. Both of us are like obsessed about matte lipsticks. And, you know, again, we are these powerful women, you know, talking to the governor's office or sitting in the boardroom with the founders and all of that. But then we still are very feminine, right? I mean, I haven't had a chance to work with Teresa, but, you know, we are okay celebrating that part of ourselves. It's not silly. It's who we are. It's just that part of us keeps us authentic to ourselves. So it's okay to have bright lipstick on, right? Because that we feel good about it. But it's all about the content that I'm presenting in that board meeting. So that's my authentic self to the work side. But when I wear my bright lipstick, I feel confident, I feel good. So I can embrace that aspect of it too. So you can balance and be both. You don't need to be a certain way or go completely away and be that, you know, the corporate person, like with very strict, and still be a lot of yourself and still be taken very seriously.
Well, I like the word that you brought in, balance, there, because every year I set these, 5 sort of major goals and for myself. And one is having a strong self, physically, mentally, spiritually. And it comes from me, from a certain discipline. I exercise, every day. I try to get reasonable sleep. I'm a longtime meditator, every day, twice a day. I, try to drink enough water and, certain basic fundamental things which allow me, and surrounding myself by supportive people, which help me maintain who I am and realize I need to balance myself, and with everything else that's going on in the environment. But I can only do that if I maintain my balance.
So true. And I love how you've all talked about this as an and. You can be successful and be yourself. It's not an or, right? And that's something that you have to kind of try, and it goes okay, and then you try it again and it goes okay, and you hope you just get better and better at leaning into that. But I love this question from Angela. It's what inspired you to be authentic? I mean, I think some of us, like I did, hit a wall where you wanted and you knew how valuable you were. You were tired of playing that game. And so you just went into the next interview and said, I'm just going to let them know exactly how I am and see real quick if it's a match. And if it isn't, I'll find the right next place that is right, that needs me. How were y'all inspired to be authentic? Because did you come out of the womb being authentic?
Well, I think I did. I mean, I'm just, this is the way I am, and it's almost like take it or leave it. And sometimes I try to tone it down a little bit, but yeah, I think it has to do with courage to be authentic. See, courage comes from a French root, courage, which means having heart. And when you know who you are, what you value, and who you are in terms of your gifts, you will have a strong heart. And I say follow your heart. And so I think that sometimes you get, when you're authentic, some negative feedback. People aren't going to like it. That's the same thing when you're an entrepreneur. You always hear, oh, that's not going to work. And it's like you have to figure out what to discard and what path you're going to follow. And like Kristen said, you're not going to always succeed, but more times than not, when you leverage the true power in you, you'll be able to get where you need to go.
Totally.
I'm sorry, Suma.
Yeah. For me, I didn't have a choice, right? I had to be my authentic self, and that was the only way it was going to work. And I'll just give a quick example to people that are struggling with their careers, or that are, don't know how to be their authentic self and still have the success. I come from India. I came here 25 years ago. I didn't have any friends in this country. I didn't know anybody, right? Literally moved with a stranger that I met 2 weeks ago, got married and moved, right? So he could have been a serial killer for all we know. That's a story for a different day. But just coming here, and there was not an option for failure in that sense, right? I just had to be strong, be whatever it took to get to the next level in my career. And I'm an immigrant. I have to prove myself. I have people that are dependent on me back home. So that was what drove me. The authenticity just followed, I think, in one sense. Again, this country is a great country. It gives opportunities to people like me without connections, without any background, without any sort of support system. If I can be successful, there's no limit to anybody else on the Zoom meeting on what's holding you back. So just be yourself and give it your best. And there's no substitute for hard work, right? The authenticity follows hard work.
Wow, what a shot in the arm. It's like that 5-hour energy drink of inspiration. Thank you, Suma. I love this next question from Tiffany. Have any of you started a new career or started over? And if so, what advice would you give? I think Tiffany might be starting a new career or starting over.
Yeah, I always talk about my career, Wendy, I always call it a circuitous path, which is code for I've never known really what I wanted to do. And 2, I've never been qualified for any job that I've gotten, and I'm fully willing to admit that. So yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us, actually, Suma and Teresa as well, we've done some really unique, very different, very risk taking types of career moves. I mean, when we went to the state, I took a pay cut. It wasn't long term, right? It was a job we knew eventually would end. It was super hard. There was lots of IT challenges, both organizationally and system wise. So, I mean, I think if the question is, about, how do you do that? I just feel like you have to be a quintessential learner. You have to be curious. You have to be, again, vulnerable. You have to say, I don't know that. I mean, it's funny. I didn't realize this, but before this panel, I was in a different job, and now I'm in another job. And so when you read my title, I was like, oh, that's wrong. Oh, well, that's because I changed jobs since the time that this panel took place, which is crazy. And so I'm in this new job, and I'm supposed to be the one in charge, and yet I'm still every day going, I don't get that. What does that mean? What are you saying? And so I think the best thing, changing careers is super difficult, and it's hard, and it's scary, and as I said, we've all done this on this panel. You just have to have courage. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be okay asking questions, and you have to be curious and be, really interested in learning. And I think if you do those things, and I'll draft off of something that Suma said, I think all of us did the things that other people weren't willing to do. And what that translates to is having tenacity and being willing to do the hard work. And that is, to me, if you said, what's the one thing that's helped you be successful? It's that. It wasn't that I was the smartest person in the room. I wasn't the luckiest. It was about hard work. And I think that that's what you have to be willing to do when you change careers.
I like to refer back to something I call the sunflower traits. You notice I like sunflowers. And that's because when I was doing my research after I sold my first company to bring it together into my book, Pursuit of Passion and Purpose, people kept asking me, well, how did you do it? And I was discerning what are the traits, what's the process, but also the traits of successful, passionate pursuers. And they align with the word sunflower. S, they have self-confidence and self-esteem. unwavering curiosity, like Kristen mentioned, and never, ever, ever quit. So each of those, F is fervor or passion. O is optimism, just like a little sunflower, will show its head to the sun and will bring W its whole self. But R, you can be resilient and will regenerate because change is inevitable. Change is the only constant in life. And to me, it's like, wow, this is exciting and interesting. And so rather than resist it, it's, get into the flow and enjoy it and bring out those sunflower traits.
Teresa, thank you for educating us on the sunflower. I didn't know what it meant. I'm going to use that acronym now. It's very helpful. And I'll give my personal example. I was one of 3 students in nuclear physics. I think Sherry from Regis University can relate, right? There's not a whole lot of women in the STEM careers. And I was so proud of that degree because I worked my butt off. It was not easy. Kristen, you mentioned your daughter. I PTSD, major PTSD from the degree, right? And I worked so hard, 3 students in this big class of boys, and I was proud. And my specialization was in radiation physics and isotope technology, and I was like, I'm going to be a nuclear medicine expert person, right? And I was Madame Curie, and all those inspirations. And then I got married and moved here, and I asked my husband, what should I be doing? And he's like, there's no nuclear physics in Denver. So I'm like, what? So I had to relearn all of my dreams and visions and my future and my career. I'm like, I just can't not do anything, right? So I immediately had to change careers and pursue my career in computers. Luckily, it was easy for me because my bachelor's was in electronics and computer science. So, but again, that changed when you worked so hard for something and you thought you were going down one path, and then life takes you on a totally different route. And so just being open, flexible, having a curious mind, as Kristen mentioned, right? All those things are what will help eventually. And give it your best, right? Don't just half-ass it. Give it your best.
I think you're all 3 world-class pivoters. I mean, you've done such different things. Like Kristen, you starting out in the railroad, right? That's crazy to think
True
back.
story.
And I think it's such a inspiration to us. Every single time I've moved and changed a lot in my career, every 3 years, it's always worked out well. But every single time I go, oh, what's this going to be like? What am I doing? So I love your inspiration for us to just go for this. Thank you. We have one from Stephanie. How do you manage speaking up with the need for politeness from that bias that women should be polite, right? When men speak aggressive, they're seen as assertive. And when women speak up or call us on where the conversation is going or make a comment, we're seen as aggressive. How do you deal with that?
Well, I was waiting for Suma to jump in because I thought this is she's such a great example of just speaking up and just how you've approached this in your life and your career. I mean, listen, here's the deal. We all understand the concept of unconscious and conscious bias, right? I think that we've come a long way in understanding that everybody grows up and we have those unconscious and conscious bias. And so I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I think it kind of depends on the spectrum of what, where it's at, right? To the point that we've all said, I mean, there may be that perception or culture or whatever, but that doesn't mean you have to follow that. And I think that in fact, we have a responsibility to show that we can speak up and not be aggressive or demeaning, and that we have something to say. We can start to help people relearn what could be an unconscious bias into, geez, this is really important that, what Wendy said in this meeting, and I'm starting to learn that, gosh, there's some really good ideas coming out of that. If it becomes, the type of thing where you feel like you're getting shut out, or there's a not a very good situation, I also think that we have the responsibility to go to somebody and say, hey, listen, I noticed that you're talking over me, or you're not letting me finish my conversation, or you're not, calling on me for my ideas. That's okay, and that's helpful. And as long as you treat it from a position of, not to be defensive, because it's not about, if somebody acts that way, it's not about you, I guess is what I'm saying. It's about them. And so just realize that. Don't take offense to it, because it's about them not understanding the way the world should work. And so you have a gift, an opportunity, an obligation, in my opinion, to educate people on, how amazing it is for us to have true voices around the table, and not just for women, but across all aspects of diversity. So that's kind of my thought on it. I think sometimes we take those really personally, right? And we say, they're doing this because they don't think I'm valuable, or they're doing this because, and we reflect it, we take that on. And all I'm saying is it's not about you. It's about them. So teach them, show them, educate them, care about them, to be better people.
And being an advocate for other women, right? It's so important. If I am in a board meeting and someone says, Kristen's being so aggressive, what the, right? And I'm like, actually, Kristen was not being aggressive. She was just stating her point. Be an advocate for other women so that they can be advocates for you. It takes a village for a successful person, a woman leader, right? So you need
Absolutely.
to rally around them, and you need to speak up in the most profound way when another woman is being targeted. That
Yes.
and they do that for you, and then you build that momentum.
And I think we can look for allies, so that you're not doing it alone, and you can make sure you see if you can find someone else. Maybe you go and you talk to them offline before or after, but who can support you in that process.
I love this. And I always remember, and you've all talked about this, when anybody's talking to you, you do this, you're aggressive, my mom used to say they have three fingers pointing back at themselves, and it's all about them. And that's helped me to realize that don't take that on. So I love that advice. Now, how about some advice from Cassandra's looking for some advice around someone who's self-employed going back to being employed. So I think there's this fear that employees won't like my entrepreneurial background. What advice would you give them about that?
Well, being the 3-time entrepreneur, I'll start this one. I started at the largest company at the world, AT&T. There were 1 million employees worldwide. And then I've been at the smallest company in the world, just myself, and everything in between, having, founded and funded and grown these entrepreneurial ventures. I actually believe that established companies need entrepreneurial spirit. That was one of the things that I really worked hard to bring into the state of Colorado, that ability to innovate and be creative and try something new and maybe fail fast or continue. So I would say own it and really project it and try to help others embrace that more, because it is a really valuable experience that more and more companies need.
And our next question is from Rose. How can you express your ideas and opinions without coming across as offensive to your manager? And I'm a management, and I'm assuming it's when you disagree with them. Most of this would come up, Rose, if I am reading into your question. So when have you had to give that bad news you disagree with them? And how can you do that in a way that you can be heard?
Now, having a relationship with your boss is very critical, where you know where they're coming from very early on. So if there is a disagreement, there's always room to go to a separate space and have that conversation over again. Don't try to do it in a room full of people, because that will lead to credibility loss on her side, your side, everyone's side. So just make sure that it's done. If you again care about the outcome, have a separate conversation, and you can say, hey, we can take it up later. There's no reason for arguments that won't go anywhere in a public forum. If you do have to, do it with a lot of empathy, do it with a lot of facts, do it with a lot of homework. Don't argue for the sake of argument. I know that's a tough advice, but it's easy to just say, hey, just go blast them right now. Don't do that, because that relationship is the most important in your workspace.
Yeah, I mean, my perspective on this, by the way, I wanted to share with you guys based on kind of, Wendy, something you said. There's a great book out there by Marie Forleo, and it's called Everything is Figure Outable. It's a great book, and it's all about, like, I'm in this situation, what do I do? She writes it's a funny book, but she's all about, like, the mantra of everything is figure outable. And I wanted to share that with all of you guys, because it's a great book, especially whether it's a career change or you're trying to find your true, north, you're trying to find your gift, your purpose, blah, blah, blah. So it's a great book.
Thank you.
My perspective on this is similar to Suma's. I'd say very simply, ask questions. Ask questions and make proposals versus going after it and saying, I disagree with you because, I think that there's ways to understand where, if there's a gap in understanding, you can either stay here and say, this is where I am, or you can try to figure out where they are. And typically through that question and answer period, whenever I've had, a disagreement or whatever, I just say, what's your intent? What's your goal? What do you need out of this? And, when you think about this solution, what came to mind for you? What worked about that? And typically, if you ask questions, you can get closer to where they're at, and therefore proposing something that maybe is closer to what you want to do based on the context and frame of reference of which they're at. Hitting them up front and saying, I disagree with you because X, Y, and Z, I've just never found that personally to be very effective. It's more through the conversation that I felt like oh, you said this because of this. Also realize your boss has perspectives that you don't have. So, they see things from a different perspective. So there's lots of things that they see that you are not in your viewpoint. And at the end of the day, if they're the boss, you have to respect that position. That's where the decision making sometimes happens. But I think if you ask questions, you can truly understand kind of what their objectives are, and then help them meet their objectives perhaps in a different way than what they perceived at the beginning.
Great advice.
Fabulous, fabulous. Okay, so this one's for Kristen to start out with, I think. How did you land the job you're not qualified for? How would you do it?
Well, I think there's only two reasons why I've ever taken any job in my career. One is because, and Wendy, you and I have talked about this, one is because I can teach. There's something I've done in my background that I think is valuable to the organization that I'm going into. And the second is because I can learn. And so I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, because I don't think unless you've done that job before, you're not qualified, right? Purely on the letter of the law. But there was something that I could bring to it that I thought was interesting and valuable. So when I was leading services for North America for Sun Microsystems, and the VP of IT service operations came available, I said, that's really interesting. I don't really know anything about, being on the IT side. I know technology, but I don't know IT. That's really interesting. And, I went to the CIO and I said, you know, hey, I'm really interested in this position. And he said, but you've never been in IT. Like you don't know anything about IT. I said, no, but here's the thing. I think IT needs to understand that they're a service-oriented company, part of the company. And I bring a services background. And so I think I actually can help you really rethink how you present yourself to the rest of the company as a service organization. So there's got to be something that you can bring value to. So you can't just like, you know, I'm not going to be a, you know, nuclear physicist. I mean, you know, like Suma can do that, but I can't do that. So there's got to be something that you can bring to the table that you can teach them. And then something that you can learn. And again, confidence and arrogance are two different things, right? So, and they should not be mixed. I'm confident in my skills, and I know that any gaps I have, I'm going to work, you know, my tail off, you know, to get covered. So that's kind of how I think about it in terms of not being qualified for any job I've ever landed.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And if you think about it, Kristen, all three experience, right? When we joined the governor's office, none of us had public sector. I didn't even know who the governor was. So but what we knew was technology, right? I knew that part. I knew how to lead teams. I know how to get projects delivered. So that's my core strength. The joint budget committee stuff, the joint technology committee stuff, what's the cloud look up in the sky stuff, I learned it later. So.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
It's all figure outable, right?
It's all, everything is figure outable. Everything, everything.
If you're tenacious enough, right?
That's
and
right,
that's what we're
that's right.
talking about. Go after it, right? I love it.
Well, and if it was something that you already did, you know, it would just be somewhat boring. I mean, so, you know, I am always looking for a way to leverage who I am in order to, you know, where I can grow and I can help the organization grow. And so that's a win-win-win.
I love it. So I love this question. What do you guys do? This is from Jacqueline, by the way. She's smart as the dickens, I can tell. What do you do for fun, and how does that keep you authentically you?
Well, I'm always looking for more fun because one of my 5 goals is being in the flow. And that to me is, you know, trying to find and have more fun. So being out in nature and hiking, there's not enough snow to really do much skiing for me down cross country this year, but I love being with people. And even if it's with video conferencing, that's still to me connections. I love serving, you know, others and seeing how I'm making an impact. It's fun to me to be with my family. I have one 24-year-old daughter, and that probably was the most fulfilling part of my whole life, you know, to balance the work with my personal life. And I just thank God, even though it took every medical intervention, that I did not miss motherhood. And so dancing, I love dancing. Not doing enough of that right now. How about the rest of you?
Great. That's so great. And, you know, I know there was a question about motherhood too, and we're all mothers, and we've had to figure that whole thing out. But for me, you know, I work out. I wouldn't call that fun. That's not necessarily what I would like to say is really
It's actually
fun,
a brutal workout. I've seen Kristen work out and I'm like, that's insane. I can't even imagine what she does.
but that's true. But it keeps me sane, I guess. I love puzzles, and like I'm a big puzzler, like all types of puzzles, brain teasers. I mean, even like video games. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it. And like actual physical puzzles, like that's really I love doing puzzles, right? And I like to travel. I love spending time with my family. I like to read books. You know, I like to cook. I think you have to find those things that you really enjoy doing. I love to sleep though. I mean, like that's really fun for me. Like
Well,
sleeping.
and what I like about what you're talking about is you're doing things that you find, I mean, to be great, not what you think is hot or timely or, I mean,
Oh.
puzzles.
Puzzles are not cool. But
Yeah,
I love it.
I mean, they could be. You would make them cool. You would. So, Suma, we'd love to hear from you.
So I love to cook. I can cook for a lot of people. That's my passion. There were times when I used to cook for like 100 people at a time, and it's just the thing that I do. I love to dance, like Teresa said. I learned classical Indian dance growing up, and I love to dance. Even I do the Zumba workouts. It's not as insane as Kristen's, but it just keeps me moving. And I just started to do yoga. My husband's a yoga practitioner for almost 30 years, and he can do the headstand for like 20 minutes at a time and all that. So he's been behind me to get into the yoga practice. So I've taken his advice seriously in the COVID time, and I'm very blessed that I found yoga now. So, and then I found Smule. All of you need to learn Smule. I was just on the other a karaoke app where it comes preloaded with the lyrics and music and all of that. And all you need to do is sing along. And it's the most amazing app that Stanford actually developed. And I'm on Smule with a very sparkly microphone, and I'm dressed in the costumes and all that. And I do that now in COVID. It's insane. My kids think I've lost my brain completely, but it keeps me going. So
I love
How do you
that. I love
spell that?
singing too. I'm gonna totally do that.
I love it.
I love karaoke.
Yeah,
How do you spell that? Spell
I'll
that.
put it in the chat. So.
Oh, thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Smule, okay. And especially doing Smule when you can't sing would be really authentic.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you're putting it out there. Well, this has been incredible. We've got more questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but we had such great attendance, and you powerhouse women are why. I mean, we could talk to you for hours and then play some Smule or whatever, however you say that. So, but thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to see where you go next. And Kristen, find out how big an impact you're going to, and Dish, what you're going to do there. And Teresa, definitely where you're going to go next. So thank you so much for sharing your time with all of us.
Thank you so much. This
Thank
is
you.
fun.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. And Wendy, you're such a
Thank you.
rock star. So thank you. Thank you.
Kristen, you're too
And
sweet.
to our listeners,
And to our
please
listeners.
believe in yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Anything is possible.
So we did the coolest thing with this. We actually made this a 3-part series, and we kick it off, of course, with the biggest names. We have 2 other events coming up. First is the 13th of March. We have the Regis is presenting the 5th annual Women in Leadership Conference. So please check that out. And then I'm doing April the 10th, the 4th annual Not Just a Rib Conference for Working Women with Faith, where we work on our spiritual and our professional development, because we're all about bringing our whole selves, talk about being authentic, right? So please check those out, and we cannot wait to see you at those. And thank you again. Let us know through social media. We'll do more of these types of events. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.